Hello, this is a how to play guide on a game that's under development called Scavengers War. So this game is currently free as a print and play or on Tabletop Simulator, which there'll be links for both underneath this video. The game itself is a war game, which is divided up into two-player packages, or you can combine the two together to have a 2 to 4 player game. In this video, we're going to be looking at one, so we'll look at the Mammalia set, and we'll just leave the Reptilia one out for now. So the game itself plays in about 90 minutes. And yeah, let's have a look inside. So what you'll get inside is, first of all, there'll be 2 player screens. So these just used to hide all your decisions that you're making. On top of that, there'll be 3 player boards each, which are tarot card size. So they will include a resource board, a command board, and a battle board, which each side will have their own. Then as tokens, we have some artifacts. We have tokens for squads and also cubes for workers for each team. We'll have another set of cubes, which will be for resources. And then each team will have their own deck of small cards, mini cards. So within that, you'll have 4 squad cards. There will also be a set of troop cards. So you'll have different types of troop, which will be swords, archers, spears, and cavalry. And then on top of that, there will be upgrade cards. So each team will have their own set or their own little deck of cards. And then finally, there will be the map tiles. So these are made of 7 hex shaped tiles. I'm not sure what you call this shape. Within them, you'll have, within each set, you'll have 1 for each species. So these ones will show the shield with the species symbols within them. There will be 1 city tile, which on the back will have a 1 on it. Then on top of that, there'll be a set of tiles with 2 written on the back. And then on top of that, there'll be a set with 3 written on the back. I think totaling 19 different tiles. So yes, that's everything that's within it. Okay, so this is how the setup should look. The objective of the game is that you are playing as groups of scavengers that basically you need to come into this ancient city from your camps and gather some of these old human artifacts. They'll give you a technological advantage to win the war. And the team that will win is the team that returns the most of these artifacts. Or always the team that brings 3 artifacts back to the base is the team that wins. If you're playing with the Reptilia set as well, you can also play a team game, which is 2v2. In that case, it is the first team to return 5 artifacts. Otherwise, in any other game mode, it's first to return 3 artifacts to the base to win the game. So to lay out the map, you start off with the city tile, and that just goes in the centre of the table. And then from that point, you get the 6 tiles with 2 on the back. And what you have is you'll have little arrowheads. So there'll be the ends of the arrowheads. I'll get this to focus properly. So that'll be the back ends of the arrowheads, and then that will be the front ends of the arrowheads there and there. So what we want to do is line up these arrows with their counterparts on this. So I'll just come around this with these 6 tiles. And you want to do this randomly as well. You want to have them face down as you bring them around. Then once you have them in place, you can then take the player tiles and place them on the corner, so in line with the tiles you've already placed in the closest positions to your own seating area, let's say. So again, lining up the arrows on both sides. And then finally, you take the tiles with 3 on the back, and you do the same again. You just come around. If you go clockwise, it saves any confusion. You can then take each tile and lay them up in their positions. Okay, so with your board in place, the next thing is to get the artifacts. So in a 2-player game, there are 5 artifacts. The setups for 3 or 4-player games can be found in the manual, in the instructions. So you lay 1 in the centre of the centre tile, and then 1 in the centre of each of the layer 2 tiles, other than the ones closest to each player's base camp. And then you take all your resources and just put them on the table in reach of both players. So next, each player sets up their own player components. To do this, if you take your resource board, lay that on the left, then next to it you'll have your command board, and to the right of that your battle board. On your resource board, it's worth taking the 10 cubes of your own colour, these are your workers, and just lay them up in the worker area on your resource board. Up next, you want to take your screen, so your player screen, and just lay it up so it covers your command board so your opponent can't see it. And then you want to have this, which is your battle marker, and that can sit on its corresponding spot on your battle board. Next up, you want to take your 4 squad cards and just lay them up below your command and battle boards, like so. And each one of them will have a corresponding battle token, which can be sat on top of each. And then finally, take your troop cards and your upgrade cards and lay them on the corresponding areas. So there's reserved troops on the right of your resource board, and then reserved upgrades on the left. So now I'll do the same for my opponent. This is Tom, he's my opponent today. So he's now set up as well. One thing I should point out is that the artifacts should be placed face down at the start of the game. And then for the next section, we'll need to shuffle our upgrade deck. Then from that, each player will draw 6 cards, and then they will get to keep 3 of their choice. So say I want to keep these 3, and then the other remaining 3 will be shuffled back into their deck and placed back where it was. And then after doing that, each player will then lay 3 workers, one at a time, based on their team's initiative. So your team's initiative is shown on the bottom left of your resource board. So in my case, I've got 58. Tom, in this case, has got a higher initiative of 72, so he will be going first. So these are the workers, these black cubes, or the cubes of your own colour. So Tom would choose where to place these. Each worker can gain resources of different types from different types of terrain. So the terrain that you'll see is there'll be lakes, which produce food, which are the pink cubes. There will also be wooded areas, which produce wood, which are the brown cubes. And then there's mountainous areas, which produce metal, which are the grey cubes. Each set of terrain, so in this case it's 3 mountain hexes, that would produce 3 metal, or 2 lake hexes produce 2 food, 2 wooded areas produce 2 wood. But if you get areas like this, where the hexes are adjacent to one another of the same type of terrain, they would add together. So if you had 1 worker on either one of these 2 lakes, you would produce 5 food because there's a 2 and a 5 connected. And then the same would go down over here. If you had a worker on either one of these 2 terrains, so you choose a hex within this terrain, then you would gather 5 metal at the start of each turn. So let's just say Tom wants to go over here. I'll come over to this place. And Tom can also join me, so he could also lay a worker on the same terrain, as long as it's not on the exact same hex. He'd be able to play something. And then I'll just put these wherever for now. Okay, so then that will be us all set up with 3 workers on the map, and that will bring us to our resource phase. So the resource phase is all about just gathering the resources based on your workers on the map. So any worker that's on the map is considered as an active worker. So in this example, I'll just do for myself, so the red workers. So I have 1 worker here, so I'd get 5 metals. I've got 1 worker over here, which will give me 3 wood, and 1 more worker over here, which will give me 5 food. So that'll be 5 food, which would be 5 pinks, 3 wood, which would be 3 browns, and 5 greys for 5 metals. And then I'll lay them up on their corresponding areas on my resource board. And that's it for the resource round. So after the resource phase comes the command phase, which takes place on the command board. This is the main chunk of the game. So players will hide their command boards behind their player screens, and what they will do, they will allocate their resources. So either the left or the right hand side of the command board. And I'll explain in a second what each side does. So let's just say for now, I'll spread these like so. So once each player has allocated their resources, so they leave their workers and just bring the resources to each side, and everyone's happy, then everyone removes their player screen to show the opponent what they've got selected. And then this phase takes place first with domestic commands, so everyone completes their domestic commands, and then everyone completes their marching commands on the right. The player that will go first whilst doing each one of these phases is the player who has the most resources by number on that specific side. So on the domestic side, let's say I've got 6 resources, and if Tom over here, let's say for example he's got 8 resources on his domestic phase, he would be going first for the domestic phase. So he would play out his domestic phase, which I'll explain what that means in a second. And then once he's played his out, I would get to do the same on mine. And then we move on to the marching phase, and again we count. So I've got 7, and let's say Tom's got 6 resources on his marching side. That would mean I get to go first when it comes to the marching commands. So I'll explain what they are now. So the commands are split into 2 different types. So there are domestic commands on the left, or marching commands on the right, and they take place. So everyone does domestic commands first, and then they do their marching commands later on. So the commands as well, within the domestics, there are a few options you can do, and you can see an image of these cubes. So if there's an image of a brown cube, say we want to do an upgrade command, brown cube is worth 2 resources, and any other cube would be worth 1, other than workers. Workers don't come into play in this phase. Or if I was training, then metals would be worth 2, everything else would be worth 1, or assign food would be worth 2, and everything else worth 1. So to go through the options that we have, so upgrade, what you could do, there's 2 different types of upgrades that can be done. So one is make available, and that costs the number of active workers. So again, the active workers are the number of your cubes, your color cubes on the board. So I've currently got 3 active workers because I'm red. So that would cost me 3 resources. So that could be 1 brown and 1 of something else, for example. And that would allow me to take the top card from the upgrade deck, and then I can just stick that in my available upgrades. And then below that, I could activate a card. So this all takes effect after everyone's laid the stuff up. So to activate, that's the cost shown. So for example, this would cost 4 to activate. And to activate an upgrade, I would just put it down face up next to my board or anywhere on the table, really. So to train, that is, I get to look through the deck of troops and I can choose what troop type I want. So let's say I want an archer, for example. Archers cost 3, shown on the bottom left, and this has 5 attack. So I would show this to my opponent. So I'll put the rest of the cards back there. I would show this to my opponent and say, okay, I'm buying an archer. And then I would put it face down on my available troops. Then the other option is to assign. So to assign costs 2 per troop. 2 resources or a food is worth 2 in this example, so it could be 1 food. And that would allow me to take any face down card from my available troops and place it on any one of my 4 squads. So let's say I want to put it there. That means that this troop is now in this squad. So the right hand side of the command board allows players to do marching commands, which allows you to send troops out into the field to gain these artifacts, which is actually the main objective of the game. So the first team to return 3 artifacts to their base wins. Or if it's in a team game, if you're playing with 4 players, then it's 5 artifacts between the team of 2 people. So on the marching phase, you have 3 options as well. So we have march, which what marching allows you to do is to take a squad that's got some troops within it. So let's say this, for example, we've got a little cavalry unit, and we can take this troop and place it within our base, and then from there we can march out and away from the base. To do that, it'll cost us 2 resources per hex moved, but if our army is over the size of 6, then it'll cost us an extra 1 per additional 6 troops. So anything from 1 to 6 troops costs 1. Sorry, anything with 1 to 6 troops, you do not pay the additional 1. But with anything between 7 to 12 troops, you'll pay plus 1. So it'll be 2 plus 1, so you'll be paying 3. Or more than that, so 13 to 18, you'll be paying plus 2, so you pay 4 per hex. Whilst you're marching, if say you get to a artifact and you end your turn the artifact, you can't pick up an artifact whilst it's face down, basically. So to flip an artifact, you have to end your turn on the artifact, and at the start of your next turn, that artifact will be flipped, and that'll allow you to bring the artifact back towards your base. You can also at any point drop an artifact and leave it behind. Or if an artifact's already flipped and you happen to be marching past it, you can pick up the artifact on your way past and just bring it with you, if it's face up, all in the same turn. So to carry your artifact, it costs plus 1 resource per hex moved. So for example, with this troop, if I'm bringing this artifact back, that will cost 2 just for the general movement of the troop, and then plus 1 for the artifact. We're paying 3 resources per hex moved. And again, in this case, food's worth 2 resources. The other options are place workers. So as you're moving around, so let's say we are where we are, if I want to place a worker, that'll cost me my number of active workers. So again, I've got 3 active workers, so that would cost me 3. So if I had 3 resources there, and then what I could do, for example, where I am now, I could pay that to remove this worker from my opponent. And that would just take it off the board and give it back to him, and he would put it back in his supply of workers. That would become an available worker for him. So we'd have 1 less active worker. So that would be destroy a worker, sorry, and then I get, which would be the lower one, and then place a worker, which is above that. I could then pay again my number of active workers at the point of me placing it, so it's 3, and I get to place this one back down. So that would have cost me 3 to put down my 4th worker. Yeah, and I think that's about it for the command phase. You can't place a worker on another worker. It can be on the same terrain, but not on the same hex. Okay. After the command phase, if there are no battles initiated on the board, players will go back to the resource phase, and then they'll continue doing resource phase, command phase. However, if there is a battle initiated on the board, so where there are 2 squads of different, or 2 enemy squads on top of each other on the board, that means battle is initiated. So what that means is that each player will gather their troops from that squad. So I've got my squad 1. I'll take my troops that are on there, so I've added a few extra troops. And then they are laid up facing each other. So if you split them into the different types, so I've got 3 cavalry, and I then have 2 archers and 2 sword units. So I'll have them face up, aiming at my opponent, and my opponent will do the same. So I'll do that now. So now Tom has lined up his troops. So we can see he's got 1 cavalry, 2 spears, an archer, and 4 sword units. Each player at this point will then take their player screen and place it in front of their battle board. On top of that, each player will then take any available workers. So any worker that's not on the board is considered to be an available worker, and place them on their battle board. Also, any remaining resources that are on the command board, they are also brought over to the battle board. If you have remaining resources on your command board and there isn't a battle phase, those resources just recycled back onto your resource board. But in this case, there is a battle phase, so they're brought over here. The way that battle phases take place, once everything's all lined up and set up, is that each player will simultaneously choose a type of troop to attack with. So different troops have different strengths or bonuses against other troops. So as you can see here, archers have double damage against swords, swords have double damage against spears, spears have double damage against cavalry, and cavalry have double damage against archers. So in this example, let's say I choose to attack with archers. So to do that, I will take my battle marker and I'll place it on the archer square. Then these resources and workers, they are used as additional damage. So my archers, for example, they do 5 damage each, and I've got 2 of them. But then I have these workers which are used as militia during battle. They're worth 1 extra damage each. So I can choose to assign, let's say I assign 3 militia workers to the attack as well. And also I can then assign these resources. Different resources, you can see there are cubes, called the cubes again. So based on the cube, you get 2 attack strength if you use that type of cube. So with the archers, there's brown cubes, so wood. So I've got some wood here, so I'll use my 2 wood as well. And then that's me ready. So I've now selected which troop I'm attacking with by placing my battle marker on there, and then I've also assigned any resources or militia I wanted to that if I can do. So once each player has selected what they're happy to do, we then reveal, so you move your screen out of the way and show your opponent as to what they've got. So let's say Tom in this example, he selected his sword units. And also on top of selected sword units, he has got 2 militia, and he's also got 2 metals, which are worth double. So that'll give him an extra 4 plus 2, so 6 attack he'll have on top of all of his swordsmen. However, the archers get double damage against swords. So if I look at my archers, they're worth 5 each. I also have an upgrade. So if any players have upgrades, for example, you can have an upgrade saying something like archers gain +1 attack. So each archer is now worth 6. So I've got 12 damage on my archers alone, but they get double against swords. So because of that, they are now worth 24. They're worth 24 plus 4 for wood and 3 for my militia. So that's 24 plus 7, so that'll be 31 damage that I'm doing. On the other hand, he has got 4 sword units with 4 each, so that's 16, plus the 4 for them, for his metal, and plus 2, so that'll be 22. So it'll be 31 damage against 22, which in this case will mean that I will defeat him, so he will lose all of his sword units. In the event that both players have selected troops that have the same strength as each other, all troops in that attack are removed. But in this example, where there is a winning side, you will take damage based on the difference of your attacking strengths. So in this example, I had 31 attack versus Tom's 22. So there's a difference of 9 in that. And the way you calculate casualties is to look at the strength of each of your units. So my units were worth 12 each in this fight because they're worth 5 each, plus the 1 for the upgrade. So that's 6 each times 2 because they're against sword units. So because they're worth 12 each, only one of these will survive with a difference of 9. Because even if the difference was 1 damage or 1 attack strength, then one would survive. Anything up to 12, one would survive. If the difference was more than 12, if the difference was 13 plus, then both would have survived. Because you're basically looking at the strength of one unit in that attack in correlation to the difference in each army selected attack. Okay. So once that attack has been done, you repeat the process. So again, you would cover your battle board. These used resources are returned to your resource board, so they can't be used again in this battle. Any troops that have died are returned to the reserve troop deck, and then players would again select who they're attacking with until one army has been wiped out. Once that army is wiped out, let's say these die as well, then any remaining troops are then brought back to their squad card, and then the losing army would remove their squad marker from the board and return it over here. If there are more than one battles taking place, then battles will take place in the order they're initiated. So if there are 2 battles, whichever one was initiated first, they'll do the battle for that one first. And then any resources and militia are not refreshed after each battle, so you have to use the same ones for all the battles that you're taking place in. So once the battle phase is complete, players will return back to the resource phase, and then it will continue to cycle like that, going through resource phase, then command phase, then potentially battle phase, and background again. And this will continue until, or as players bring their squads out to gather artifacts to bring them back to their base. Once an artifact's been returned to a player's base, it can't be removed, so it's safe once it's been returned. And the first player to return 3 artifacts to their base is the winner. Unless you're playing in a 4-player team game, which it would be the first team to return 5 artifacts to their base, or to either base within that team. I think that's about it. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the game. And yeah, all the best. Goodbye from me and Tom.